This is FX Radio, and I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. And with me today is Dr. Mark Houston. Now, Mark, you have really been the driving force of getting everybody together and presenting an overarching paradigm to work from with the 2015 BioCeuticals Symposium. Can you tell me a little bit about that paradigm and why you think it's so important, please?
Well, Andrew, the present medical system is broken. It's going to go bankrupt. We cannot sustain the economic burden in any country. So unless we change the model very quickly, something's going to happen to either rationing of healthcare, worse healthcare, or something else even more catastrophic. The new paradigm then is to go back and do what we've been taught all these years, which we've ignored, which is it's a lot cheaper to prevent a problem than it is to treat it once you have it. So intervention is very expensive, prevention is relatively inexpensive. So the basic concepts of looking at your lifestyle with nutritional consultation, dietary changes, exercise, keeping your weight down, don't smoke, and don't overdrink. If you did only those 5 things, that's all you did, you would have an 80% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and cancer, which are the top 3 killers in most westernized countries. And the rest of them you can deal with, in other ways. But the idea that you can take a symptom or disease, as we've defined it, which is also another entire issue related to how you code and get reimbursed for your services in most countries, we have to realize that diseases actually are simply not the way to address medical problems. We have to address them in a process of how did you get to that disease. Think backwards. What is the underlying etiology of how we got there, looking at the beginning and treating people early on and very aggressive in trying to prevent them from getting into a situation where we have a disease that we have to intervene.
Your co-presenters, Dr. David Hasse, Mike Ash, and Dr. Joe Pizzorno, have been talking about various concepts. Mark Houston, you with cardiovascular disease, Joe Pizzorno with detox or toxification, Mike Ash with gut issues, and Dr. David Hasse with neurological issues. Can you tell me how they're meshed together with the overarching paradigm of inflammation, immune dysfunction, and oxidative stress?
All diseases, as we presently define them, are interrelated and interconnected in a bidirectional spoke-like wheel phenomena. I like to call it the biological hologram. And what that means is that just because you have a brain issue does not necessarily mean you don't also have a gut issue or a cardiovascular issue or somehow tied to toxins. So we have to think a bit out of the silo approach, which is we are a specialist in something, and think that, yes, but our organ system that we treat has a direct interconnection with everything else, which means that the pathogenesis, oxidative stress, immune dysfunction, and inflammation are the basic finite responses of all these infinite insults that people throw at us. And if you start and think a little bit upside down or backwards and take on the finite responses and say, why am I inflamed? And you go back and you track it to the genesis of the inflammation. You say, well, that's fine. It's mercury that created all of these problems, or it's some other insult that I've missed, and the downstream effects of one thing, like gluten in your diet, can cause enormous problems downstream that relate to multitudes of diseases. And rather than going to your physician and saying, I have A, B, C, and D, and I'm going to give you a pill for A, B, C, and D, I'm going to now think differently. I'm going to go back and find out what caused A, B, C, and D, and then I'm going to remove the cause, and guess what? All those things get better after addressing the genesis of the problem.
So if I might, linking, let's say, an infection with Helicobacter pylori with potential cardiovascular disease, or linking depression with arthralgias, depression with neurological disease, is this how you're linking everything in and saying, okay, well, they're aspects of it, but that's not necessarily the cause?
Exactly, because, for example, let's just take your analogy with H. pylori. H. pylori is consistently considered a gut disease, but we don't really think of it as perhaps being a cause of cardiovascular disease, which it is because it's the infectious disease pathogenesis of coronary heart disease and myocardial infarction. And we also don't think of it as being a problem perhaps with your brain. But H. pylori has, by creating inflammation in the systemic circuit, also creates inflammation in your brain. So everything's interconnected. And I guess one analogy that you would understand is if you're standing on the edge of the pond and you threw a large rock into the center of the pond, there's quite a bit of a ripple effect there. It doesn't stay in one spot. So if you think of that as being the insult that you just threw into your body, you can see what happens with the metabolic pathways, ramifications of one insult through the biological system.
Mark, as one of the driving forces of the BioCeuticals 2015 Symposium, tell me about your experiences with the other speakers and indeed with the audience.
I have to say that this has been an incredible experience, delightful, a passionate experience of being able to teach, to get feedback from the attendees of they've really learned something. They have a practical way now to apply their knowledge in their offices and help patients, which is really what this is all about. It's to improve patients' health and prevent disease. BioCeuticals took a leap of faith actually by allowing me to design and help them with this symposium, picking topics and speakers and a totally revolutionary type agenda, where we had didactic sessions followed by case workshops, and everybody worked really hard. I mean, all the staff of BioCeuticals worked hard. We really put the faculty through the treads, and I think they're going to be quite worn out. But I think the attendees that were here, all of them, all the comments I've received have been incredibly favorable. One of the best symposiums they've ever been to. They've learned a lot. They've got a lot more to learn. If they want to learn more, they'll be coming back. So I think we've set a new standard, in my opinion, for education in Australia.
Dr. Mark Houston, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This is FX Radio, and I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook.